And welcome back to LA Fishguys, part 5 of the Algae Filter episode. It's been 2 weeks that we've had our algae filter running with the light on top of it and some Chaeto algae inside of it. Does it look like it helped? Maybe I'm expecting results too quickly, but I will be positive and say that I think it's a little bit less hair algae growth than I normally see. So it's been 2 weeks we've had the algae filter on the tank running. We've arrived this morning. You can see there's been no real change in the algae growth in the tank, but maybe that was a little soon to expect that. What we're interested in is the algae in the algae filter. Are they growing? And if so, are they in that growth phase where they're sucking up the nutrients that the hair algae in the tank is feeding on? We've arrived this morning, the light is on, so it's either been on 24/7 or the timer that I installed is working. We set this up so that the lighting on the algae filter was the opposite time frame as the algae growing in the tank. The idea being there that there's a photosynthesis that occurs amongst the plants or all the algae, and as they produce and give off oxygen and suck up carbon dioxide, if there's light on the algae throughout the whole 24-hour period, whether it be in the filter or in the tank, it produces a stable environment. Let's go ahead and lift the lid off the filter and see what the algae in here look like. Well, the algae definitely looks still alive. Let's go ahead and lift the lid off and get a better eyeball on exactly what it's doing. So you can see here, there's been a little bit of growth of the algae, the Chaeto, at the surface. There's also obvious growth of not only a little bit of hair algae inside the algae filter, but some other interesting types of algae. Not exactly sure what they are. One thing we do want to pay special attention to is that double strainer set on the drain side of the algae filter. Here is where all of the algae or debris may collect. So I've cleaned that area off briefly, but I want to go back and address this Chaeto algae a little bit. Now at this point, normally if this algae were growing, and I'm referring to the Chaeto algae, we would begin to harvest some of it out of there. Take out maybe 10-15% each service visit. Since this has only been in here 2 weeks, I don't see that much growth. Not only do I want to just leave it alone, but I can untangle it a little bit, thus spreading it out a little bit further and exposing it to more light, where potentially this Chaeto algae can grow a little bit faster. And with that completed, we'll put the plastic lid back on top of our algae filter system. And with that repositioned, we can then take and place our power compact style light in its little enclosure back on top of the algae filter. So we'll go ahead and clean the outside of the tank with the aquarium cleaning magnets. Then we're going to go in and try to suck out some more of that hair algae out of the tank. Those aquarium cleaning magnets sure make short work of that algae on the inside of the acrylic panels. But here at the sand level, I've got to get in and use that pad on a stick to brush that front layer of sand away from the front edge of the tank. You can see that green stripe in there. That's the results of the algae growing at that point. So to lessen the amount of algae that the algae filter needs to compete with, we're going to go in and siphon out a lot of that loose hair algae in the tank. Try to knock it down so that what's left, either the fish or the hermits or the snails can graze on, or the algae in the algae filter will compete against that short stuff that I've just mowed down inside the tank and hopefully make it disappear easier or be consumed or starve it of its nutrients easier. And so our attempt here should not be misunderstood as a solution for hair algae problems. It's just a way of trying to control the growth or at least decrease the growth, which in turn hopefully allows our algae filter to compete much easier with whatever nutrients the hair algae is feeding on. We'll go ahead and use the first 2 buckets of water siphoned out of the tank to try to drag or draw as much of the algae off the rock as possible. So you can see here we've siphoned out a whole bunch of it, and some of it comes out easy and some of it just does not want to let go of the rock. But we're trying to lessen the load or the amount that's still in the tank in hopes that the algae filter will be able to compete with the lesser amount that I've left in the tank. The second 2 buckets will devote to siphoning the debris out of the gravel or sand bed out of this tank. Now I have to admit, what I find very frustrating is what is encouraging, what's feeding the hair algae. If you stop and think about it, there are 3 magical elements involved in any plant growth: light, water, and nutrients. Well, it's a coral reef tank, so we have to have a lot of light. That's not only going to encourage the corals to grow, but the zooxanthellae algae inside them, which is what we're attempting to stimulate. Unfortunately, it's also encouraging the algae growth. The second thing is the water. The source of the water here happens to be real ocean water. I have, many years ago in the past, resolved an algae problem by stop doing water changes. And it obviously starved the algae of whatever it was feeding on. But I can't really stop doing water changes at this point because I've got to get in there and clean the sand. I've got to siphon that algae off. Maybe some other attempt down the road will do that, but you can't go through the no water change approach. In the long run, that really just doesn't work. The third issue is the nutrients, the fertilizer, what the algae is actually feeding on. This particular tank, again, is using real ocean water. Is there something in that water that's encouraging this algae to grow? Again, years ago, I stopped an algae problem by stopping water changes. I stopped adding whatever the algae apparently was feeding on as I put it into the tank. It's kind of something I can't do here. Could I switch to another type of water, reverse osmosis, and make up my own synthetic seawater? I could. To be honest with you, as a service person, prefer not to. Having to make 600 gallons of water is, for me, a problem waiting to happen, because obviously that's going to take some time. And unfortunately, with all the things I have to do, I'm not going to stand next to the container and watch it as it's filling. So you can probably count on the fact that it'll overflow that container. So I'd prefer not to go that route. Just to add something to it, I happened to get a telephone call this morning from the fellows in Wyoming. They have that 280-gallon coral reef tank. Doesn't have any fish in it yet. It doesn't have any corals in it yet. They both just came back from a week's worth of vacation, and the tank has burst into an algae problem. And they're using a brand new reverse osmosis deionization purification system. So to a certain degree, it's something in the seawater, but I don't really think it has a whole lot to do with how that seawater is actually made. There's some small magical element in there that this algae is feeding on, and whether it be natural seawater or synthetic seawater, that magical element seems to still be in there. So we're going to continue here. We're going to replenish it with 20 gallons of real ocean water, and we'll continue to wait out the algae filter's growth and see, as it begins to grow and come online, if the algae in the tank begin to decrease. We've been running our protein skimmer, and you can see it's still collecting a goodly amount of organic skimmate in there. I don't know if that's the results of the algae dying off or excess fish food or something like that, but the protein skimmer has been working and doing its job. So that's been the first 2 weeks of operation with the algae filter in the tank. I've seen no real significant decrease in hair algae inside the main tank. I've seen some growth down inside here of the chaeto. I've also seen a little bit of the hair algae growing inside here. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks, this algae will begin to advance and will really start competing for the same nutrients that the hair algae inside the tank is feeding on. At least that's the plan, and that's the hope. Come on back for the next part, which will be in 2 weeks, and we'll see how well the algae filter's actually doing.